Somos Viña.
We are Vineyard.
If love is the target, you really can't go wrong. That's just the way that Jesus paved for us. And there's so much to be proud of if we do the work to love really well in ministry. And if love stops being the bomb, like the thing, then we get off course.
Yeah.
So.
Welcome to the We Are Vineyard podcast, conversations to help us grow with Jesus and each other. In today's episode, Jay Pathak talks to Jessica Gatton. Jessica is the Vice President of Ministry with Alpha USA and has grown up in life and ministry in the Vineyard. Let's listen in.
Jess, thanks for joining me
Thanks for having me.
Our We Are Vineyard podcast. And remind me again, where are you sitting? Like right now, you're in your home?
I'm sitting in my home in Columbus, Ohio.
Columbus, Ohio. Yep. The heart of it all.
The heart of it all.
The heart of it all. Well, yeah. Where in Columbus do you live?
Worthington.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I grew up in Dublin. So
yes, I do
far.
know that.
Yeah. Okay. So not far.
I go to Dublin.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's different. It's like a different place now than when I was there.
It is a different place. They've got the bridge and all the fun things.
Oh, it's a whole universe that has changed. And good schools, yeah. There was good schools that I was there for what it's worth. But yeah, I know they are. Okay, so let's start where all things start, which is where you were born and where you grew up. Even though I know that, it's for everyone else.
It's for everyone else. Yeah. I was born in Columbus, Ohio, and I grew up here.
That's right. Good.
So I've been here this whole time. I was in private schools, Christian school, growing up in Columbus, and went to college here. Stayed.
Private school. Which private school in Columbus?
Gahanna Christian Academy. It doesn't exist that way anymore, but it exists in a form, but not that form.
Okay. And of course, I know your family. So, of course, I know bits about your deal. But what kind of family did you grow up in?
My parents got divorced when I was 2. And so at that time, my dad ended up having a pretty radical conversion to Jesus. And I did too, as a 2-year-old can. You know, in your late 20s, and 2-year-olds have different conversion experiences. But I encountered Jesus really young in that family crisis. And then both my parents, though, lived in Columbus the whole time. So I grew up going back and forth to both places, and was in the school I was in was really steady and consistent. So that was kind of my formational years. It was just me and going back and forth between my parents. They both ended up getting married again. And my dad to a woman named Nancy that still love her and very present to me in my life. And my mom had 2 different marriages, but then a daughter that came out of those marriages. So sister and got brother and sister. So it's a big blended, loving family for me. Coming out of Columbus, Ohio.
Yeah. And so your dad, of course, I mean, actually, I think it's today, we were just saying, had his retirement party. Is it called retirement? Do we call it retirement?
It's retirement because he's done 25 years at Vineyard Columbus. So at Columbus Vineyard, he was my youth pastor. He was my middle school pastor, my high school pastor, and then ran the community center. And so today we were celebrating him as he kind of opens up this next chapter of his ministry and his life. And it was really special to be there. One of the things that, I mean, he was a Vineyard pastor, so I obviously spent a lot of time in Vineyard spaces growing up. And him being my youth pastor, I was thinking about how many hours I've probably spent with my dad in that building. When I was there today, and it's like hundreds and hundreds of hours with him in that space, getting to know Jesus and ministry and all that. It's really special.
It is so special. And so you grow up in this thing, the Columbus Vineyard, and so through all of that, I mean, obviously you're doing some pretty fun ministry stuff now that we're going to get to in a minute, but how did you start to feel like, man, I feel like I have calling on my life, or man, I love watching what my dad's doing. I think I want to do ministry. Or was it like, no, I'm definitely not doing this. I want to do something else.
You know, It's probably different days, two things. I'm an Enneagram 9 with the 8 wings, so I have two different personalities.
Sure. Yeah.
But I think growing up, I just loved church. So church, there was a little bit of chaos to my life with my family situation. As loving and good as both my parents were, consistency wasn't like my main experience. But Vineyard Columbus really was. It was this every week. I experience God's presence, and it was home. And it wasn't just the church that was home, it was God's presence, but this tangible place of experiencing it. And all these people that loved me, even today at this retirement party, just seeing people that invested in me and loved me. And so church felt good. It felt so good. So that, I think, made me believe that church was good and that the person of Jesus is good. And then my dad really loved me. And of course, every parent-child relationship has its complexities, but overall, we're good friends. And he's always loved me deeply. And so I think there's just, when you experience something that's so good, you're like, I want to be part of this and other people should experience it. So it was never like, oh, I'm going to be a pastor and there's this call in my life and I'm going to do ministry. It was more like, I love this. And my dad would lead the middle school ministry. We would drive home afterward and I'd always be critiquing what happened and saying, this is weird and we need to adjust here.
Right.
So there's like environmental instincts, I guess, that I was noticing. I love people. I love sociology. So I'm always observing rooms and trying to figure out what's going on. And then probably it wasn't really till college that I was leading my own group kind of apart from my family of origin. It was really me doing it, leading a small group. People were meeting Jesus and coming, and I was like, man, this is what I want to give all my time to. I don't want to study. I don't want to do anything with this. Obviously, I did study and got good grades. I studied social work and felt like, oh, this is a good match. I like to study people. Ministry is people. So if I end up in ministry someday, I'll have a great skill set for it. But ultimately, social work, justice work is ministry. So I don't have to do that in a church. So I always kind of had this like, I'm called to love people and give them me and reproduce what God's given me in all these different spaces. I had this spiritual director that said, I saw her when I was in college. She said, if you don't give away what God's given you, it won't take root. So I just have really lived by that principle. Anytime God gives me something, I'm going to give it away, which is really all ministry is. In the day-to-day, at least. Yeah. I don't know. That was kind of the forming of calling, was just love, like a deep love for it, knowing that it was good. Then ended up having kind of external fruit, success. So
yeah, that's cool. Well, and I probably don't need to tell you the amount of PKs that freak out at some point.
I've freaked out a few times.
Okay. So that's fairly common.
Yes.
In that little transition, how'd you say it? I kind of made my faith my own or leadership my own. So I had these ministry instincts because I'm just sort of in it and we're driving around talking about stuff. But then you sort of find your own feet. What do you think, like when you look at different ways PKs try to process their faith and then you kind of think about that as your own story, what do you think helped you be able, or what made it trickier and what made it better to have been in that kind of environment? Maybe you don't know. I mean,
I think the honest answer is it's complex because one of the things of my story is I always wanted to be good. And so goodness was something I think I was attracted to about God, but I was very resistant to my own humanity. So I tried in most of my life I really wanted to please God. And so I don't know if that was because I was really scared of like the consequences of not, or if it was because I thought that being good would make me loved. I mean, I've been sorting that out even in my 30s, but there was just this, I really didn't want to make God upset, and probably neither my dad or anybody else. But I also saw people not follow Jesus, and I just didn't want that. And now, I mean, obviously there's people in my life who don't walk with Jesus that I have deep respect for and, want attributes that they have. But there is something really foundational about the way of love that felt like I don't want to go outside of that. I don't trust anything outside of this space because I've experienced that as really good.
Yeah.
And that would, can compare and contrast different members of my family and different people that I grew up with. So I think that's a big part of it. I remember this moment in college. I was a freshman. I was sitting in my dorm and I thought, oh, I could decide to stop this whole thing. I get to make a choice. Nobody would, eventually they'll know probably, but I was just thinking nobody's going to know what I do on a Friday night if I don't want them to. And I just had this like, yeah, you've got a choice. I felt, kind of friendship with the Lord, like, yeah, there's a choice ahead of you. And I just thought, I'm not ready to give up on this thing yet. There's no reason not to. Keep going. And so I used to do these like calligraphy art things. And so I wrote all these Bible verses down on paper and put them up on my dorm room wall. And that was sort of like, people are going to know I'm a Christian here. And it ended up actually like a few weeks later, there was this guy that came knocking on my door at 8 a.m. He was friends with my roommate. And he's banging on my door. I opened the door. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he said, I see these letters on your wall and all these scriptures. And can you tell me about Jesus?
Wow.
And I was like, sure. And then I led him to the Lord right there in that seat. And so I just remember like, man, if I keep choosing this, people are going to notice. And it wasn't the letters on the wall. It was our friendship that we had just in passing, that would made him curious, but he knew what to ask about. And so I don't know. It's been working for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it's interesting to hear you say that your experiences of faith secured you in this reality that I know there is real love, it's real tangible, and I want to stay in that. And I really want to do the best I can, which can, as you are describing, have, that coin flips if it becomes sort of performance or, I'm not in touch with whatever else is going on. But something had secured you in a way that you're like, yeah, this is just kind of, this is the way I want it to go. And I mean, it is that testimony every parent hopes and prays their kids will have. That like, not that they won't encounter challenges, not that there won't be pain in their life, because that's going to happen, but that the life that they've had in God, in their family and in their church is substantial enough that like it holds them, secures them. It's a circle you want to stay in. It's soil that you can grow in. So that, I find that deeply affirming as a guy raising kids.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm a pastor.
I think also there's this like the nuance of my story is like I grew up in one Christian home and one not. And there's things I really learned, rich things I learned from my non-Christian,
right?
Spiritual but non-Christian environment but Jesus was the one that went with me both places.
Yeah,
it wasn't my dad.
right.
It wasn't my mom. It was the person of Jesus. And there's something experientially about that's like everywhere I go, I'm not alone. And I know loneliness. I know that feeling, but there's a kind of core God is with me that I know not everybody has that same experience of God until later in their life. But for me, it just happened pretty young.
That's so good. That's so good. Okay.
I know. It's fun.
So it's just helpful because, we all have different stories. We come through different things and that helps. I just think people need to know that there's ways people move through this life grounded in a life with Jesus in which it gets tested and things go wrong. We're not living in a fairy tale, but through that, they still retain their life with Jesus, and it leads them into a life that actually helps other people follow Jesus, like you're describing pretty naturally. So, okay, so you're going through all that. What were you studying in school, by the way?
I studied social work.
Oh, okay, cool. So you're doing social work, and are you thinking, I'm going to be a social worker? I'm going to be a teacher? How are you not even thinking about it? You're like, I don't know. I just like this.
I was thinking I was going to be a social worker. I really care about justice and family systems, people. love the work. I love studying the work. It's like when I took my first family systems class, I thought, this is my world. This is where I belong.
Yeah. What about it? What about it? What did that to you?
I mean, this is sort of a theological tangent, but there's this theology of sin, right? Of course, where people need God to correct what's in them that's off kilter, their kind of sin nature. But then I've always sort of had this, like, I think people think God made us good. And that there's a lot of things that go into the complexities of sin. That's not just they're little jerks in there. And so I think it really broadened my ability to understand and experience why people behave the way that they do. That wasn't just black and white, like good and bad, or sin and not.
Right.
Sin and righteousness. And yeah, systems theory, basically, it's like, oh, your environment forms you, and then you respond to your environment. And of course, sin and coping mechanisms and all these ways of being are mixed up in that.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like it helped me illuminate my experience of the world and my experience of what the kingdom coming actually meant, that it was way more full and deeply complex than Jesus comes and makes you right inside. You know, that is beautiful. It's a good picture, but it wasn't enough for me. It didn't quite satisfy my ability to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
Because I knew all these people who didn't know Jesus that were good.
Right.
I knew all these people that were, I don't know, making a difference and making change, but they weren't connected to the kingdom. But then all these people who were Christians that were really struggling to live a full life. And so I think it just light bulbs went on for me. So I felt like if I do social work, I can be a kingdom person in these spaces. So that's what I'll do.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be a pastor. I love leading small groups. I love this stuff. At that point, people were like, Jess, you have a call in your life to be a pastor. We think you should be a pastor. You try this internship. People started talking about it. I just thought, yeah, that'll come if it happens. But for now, this is kingdom work. So it wasn't, and I still really hold that loosely. Like a call on my life is seasonal.
Sure.
God will tell me what he wants me to do at different spaces in different moments. But I'm the same person.
Yep. Okay. So draw the lines to like where you are today. What are the processes that get you to your work, and describe a little of what you do now?
Yeah. Well, before right now I'm on staff with Alpha USA.
Yep.
I'm on an executive team and I lead our ministry strategy. Before that, I was a Vineyard pastor for all of my 20s. Basically, after I graduated college at Vineyard Columbus, I did campus ministry, then young adult ministry, then small groups ministry. Inside of that, really all of my 20s, really getting to pastor, I learned a lot of things about me. I interact with the world, and I learned so much, and I just feel so really humbled that I got to serve in that space for that time. About when I turned 30, there was, in me, things really started breaking down. And I couldn't make sense of the world the way that I used to be able to. There were a couple hard things in ministry that I came up against. Inside, I just felt like I don't want to reproduce what's happening in here. And so I didn't have that kind of clarity then. I just knew I needed something different. I don't think I'm going to be able to go this next leg well unless I stop and really look at what is going on in me. And that was kind of when my story, the impact of my story, actually, I did Emotionally Focused, started kind of coming to the surface, and I feel like I have all these things to steward and take care of. And I've got 2 little kids that I also need to take care of. So I need to take care of less people. I don't think I could be pastoring in this state. So I did not have that kind of clarity then. It was probably everybody else's fault. But anyways, I listened.
Wait, what? What do you
know? When you're kind of crashing on the inside, you're like, somebody did something wrong, and it's why I'm acting like this.
I got it. Yeah, you wouldn't have said it the way you just said it, is what you're saying. Got it. Now I see. Again, you don't have to do any of this. Yeah. If you don't want to. But if you were in broad strokes, you were going to say, here's what I started to notice, or here's the cognitive dissonance. Because sometimes it's intellectual, sometimes it's more emotional, experiential.
Yeah.
And how did you start to see those collisions? Because the reason I ask is I don't know anybody that does, frankly, just deep work with people, whether that's a teacher, a therapist, a social worker, someone who works in addictions, or as a counselor or as a pastor, that doesn't come up against their own pains and fears and wounds that get either accentuated or surfaced at some window in their life because they bump up against something that either is so like their own stuff or maybe it's the accumulation of things. There's just sort of a death by paper cuts. There's just a weariness that surfaces certain realities. So there's a lot of doors. But the kind of thing you're describing is, about everybody I've ever known. And sometimes it's a combination of things from without, not just from within. A thing happens with my kid or in my marriage or with my parents or whatever. So without having to get into all the nitty gritty, because I think it helps people to go, oh, okay, this is what people go through. Yeah. What kinds of things were you either through the work or just, the work with EF or other things, or just externally? What would you start to notice that made you go, I need a different thing?
Yeah, it was kind of the collision of a lot of things. So there was the reality that ministry wasn't serving my marriage in the best way that it could be. Yeah. And that was getting clearer and clearer. And so I was grateful that my husband said, I think something needs to change. And I love to work, and
I get it. Yeah,
I love it. And when I was pastoring, especially, it consumed a lot of me, and I didn't even know that it was. It just felt like all the things were good. There was a few situations with congregation members that were very intense. I'm like I don't know if you know the Strengths Finders gift, restorative. That's like one of my top ones. And so I'm always like, let's get to the roots and go to the top. I'm always kind of looking for the deeper thing. And so at that time, I didn't have great boundaries on that. But then faith walking or emotionally focused, I learned like my kind of core vow or core thing I was living by was I'll be who other people need me to be, even at the expense of myself.
Woof. Yeah.
So there's this like clear, I'm going to be externally oriented. And if I get that right, then I'm okay inside. Yeah. And I was just getting it right in lots of places, but I was not okay inside. Yeah. And my marriage was saying, we're not okay. Yeah. So the combination of those two things and really not having the skills to get out of it inside of ministry. Yeah. Partly because I grew up there, partly because there's just long history of relationships. So what's unique about my story is I was really in the same space the whole time, which is amazing. But it also, I had a limited view of what was possible because I was always in the same space. So looking at how that being who other people need me to be, even at the expense of myself, how it was wearing at me, I had just no idea how to, I see it, but I have no idea actually how to get out of it. And that, I guess I knew I needed to pause. And I really had no idea what that meant when I decided to leave. I just thought I needed to take care of myself. And I have no idea how to do that. I've never done it.
Right. Exactly.
So
that
what happened.
Well, and I'm sure you've thought this, but I'll say it to you. I mean, the level of courage required to do that's pretty high. Because, I don't know the ins and the outs of what you're describing, but my hunch is most that were around you probably weren't able to observe what you're experiencing. Yeah. So most are like, it's fine. You're fine. It'll be okay. Like, people get sad or whatever. They do the things they do because they care about you. And there is a certain requisite expectation of challenge. It's easy to keep blowing through the stop signs. Yeah. because, if you just keep driving 50 miles an hour through the stop signs, you mostly won't hit anything and nothing will hit you. So
right. Totally.
It's amazing how many stop signs you can go through. But to be able to even just slow down and say, well, hold on, something's up here. I'm getting enough internal evidence, enough external evidence. Plus, I'm doing some work that's sending some signals. I definitely need to create a pause here. It's sadly unusual, even for people in ministry, the amount of folks that won't, take that kind of pause. So that's a big deal.
Yeah. I feel grateful to the Lord for it. I had this picture right when I started, I think I got turned down for a job in ministry, like early in my 20s. And I was sad, I was crying on my balcony. And I felt like the Lord said, you don't want to go ahead of me. Really clearly. And then I kind of just saw all these snaps of my life if I were to do that.
Wow. And
I just was like, okay, you're right. I don't. Yep. And not that long after, I ended up, working in ministry, and I don't really have any working as a pastor. And I feel I would probably do it really different now if I was doing it. But I don't have like a ton of regret about that season. I just look back and I go, oh, wow, there was a wellness that I couldn't keep going without a different level of emotional wellness. So,
that's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So now you're like, I got to do something different.
Yep.
I don't know exactly what that is. So how do you begin to explore other options or opportunities? How does that happen?
I just started applying for jobs. So
okay.
It's like a normal.
Well, that's the way people do it. Yeah, right.
It was not too
I can't
too
do
complicated.
this. I'm going to do something else.
I'm going to do something else. And I didn't feel like I think there was a weariness that was burnt out in my soul, but I didn't feel externally like I couldn't work,
Right. Yep.
So maybe that will happen to me someday. I'm still young, but at that time, it felt like I'm not unable to work, but I just probably shouldn't pastor. I think I felt like there's something about the relationship of pastor to my vow being, effectively pretty codependent in the way that I would behave in the world. That was like, I can't be this close to people sorting out their stuff as I am. It's kind of what I was good at. And it's, as I've done a lot of work, I'm able to get back there with a lot more healthy boundaries. But it's like, how do I do something leadership-like, director-like, but not too close to the human heart, if I can help it.
Yeah, for at least now. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah. And so I actually was going to work at a Salvation Army as an associate director. That was the job that was ahead of me. Had gotten different interviews, but that one felt like, oh, this is great. I can still do justice work, but I'm very strong belief, so I need to do something I believe in. And then my dad was on a call with Alpha USA, and they were like, hey, do you know anybody that might want to be the network director of Alpha USA in Ohio? And he was like, actually, my daughter's looking for a job right now. I'll mention it to her. And they were kind of like, oh, your daughter, okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly.
Every dad loves their daughter.
Yeah, exactly.
He was like, well, she was a small group pastor here. And then they like kind of ears perked up a little bit.
Like, oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Okay, she's not like a college student.
Right.
And then basically he told me about it, and I just overall felt like I love Alpha. It's very, so much alignment with the Vineyard, so many things I love. Things I love about Alpha is it, returns churches and Christians overall just back to the basics of sharing Jesus and expecting him to come, and he does, and people's lives are changed. That's kind of the crux of what we're trying to do. And so I was pretty hesitant, but I did kind of have a little spark in my spirit when I saw the job application. So I just applied, and to be honest, the other job I was looking at, pay was pretty low. So, I was,
So that helped to
I
think
was
about
like,
another job, right?
It
Yeah.
wouldn't be so bad if I was started pursuing something else.
Right.
And then, I interviewed once with the first time that Alpha loves to interview lots of times. But the first interview, I just thought, you know what? I feel a lot of joy about this. And then I just kept following the joy. Every interview, I just felt like it grew and grew. And so I ended up saying no to the Salvation Army job before, because I had to give him an answer before I knew about Alpha. And I just felt like if it's not Alpha, the Lord will give me something. But I ended up going to Denver to interview, my final interview with a few executive team members. And I remember Sean Hogan, who I get the privilege of working closely with now. He describes my interview as I was very hesitant about staying in ministry. I was really honest. I was like, here's where I'm at.
Yeah.
Here's where, here's
the concerns. Right.
Here's the concerns.
Yeah.
And he said, both me and Craig just felt like we wanted you on our team.
Wow.
And so I'd never been that. I mean, I probably wouldn't recommend anybody interviewing that way, but there was something for me that was just like, I really have to be where I am or I can't go. I can't keep going.
Yes.
Especially in like a ministry space. So they just I think appreciated the honesty, but then also pretty much right after that interview, I heard pretty clearly from the Lord, I'm inviting you to scale Alpha for growth. And so I thought, like, okay, in Ohio, I'm going to scale it for growth. Like, we're going to have more churches running Alpha than ever in Ohio. And then COVID happened. And we ended up having to sort of pivot and go online. And essentially, as a team, our eyes really opened, like, oh, there's a ton of possibility with Alpha in a way that we didn't really see before.
Yep.
And so pretty much right away, I felt like, oh, my gifts and the needs of the organization and my deepest passions are lining up.
Dude,
So,
what a gift.
I know. Lucky.
That is a great, no, and it's funny. I as I'm listening to you, I keep having the same story come to mind. It would have been, I'm trying to think of when it was. It might have been a couple years ago. I can't remember when it was, but I was getting my hair cut from this lady, and I was telling her what I do for a living, and we were talking about, it was near where our church is in Arvada, and I was talking about the cold weather shelter, and we're working with homelessness and some of the things that we've been doing. And right in the middle of it, she said, man, that's so cool. I just love people who have a heart for folks that are kind of on the margins. And I said, well, tell me about that. And she describes how she had been in addiction and lost her kids out of that because she had to go to jail and, her whatever. Came out of jail, went through all this recovery. I mean, like the hero's story, got her kids back. And the organization that had helped her with the recovery work, and specifically in prison, hired her to be a speaker and do her testimony. And then she would do these groups with women that were in prison or coming out of prison or in recovery. And she noticed maybe 6 months into the job that it was overwhelming her. It was bringing up so much of her previous trauma that she started to have these inclinations back towards addiction, and some of the old patterns started to surface, and even just the mental patterns, not just her heart. And so she resigned from the job and as a hairstylist. And she ended that story by saying, she says, so I guess what I've realized is I don't have the privilege at this stage of my life of doing the kind of work that you get to do. But because you're in the middle of it and I'm cheering you on, from the sidelines, I still support that organization in so many ways, but I'm not like in every bit of it. And just that little line she said has just stayed with me. Like, at this stage of my life, I don't have the privilege of doing that kind of work. There's too many other things I'm still working on.
Yeah.
And it really struck me because I thought there's not a lot of people that have enough self-awareness to pause and say, something's going on here. The work's good. I'm doing pretty good, but this is coming at a cost to me that I can see the destination. I can see this is going to end somewhere else that I don't want to go.
Yeah.
I should probably just back up a little bit and reassess this. So even them making fun of you like you were so hesitant or whatever, and you're being honest. You're also assessing for yourself. Like, so listen, here's what I can and can't do and will and won't do. Mm-hmm. Can you assure me this isn't that? Because I don't want to.
Right, exactly.
I don't want that. For your sake and my own, am I in the right zone here? So it just takes us all a lot of work to figure out which zones we work in and which ones come to cost to us that is too much or maybe not in season. So that's incredible. Okay.
It's interesting. It's interesting, the line about privilege. I feel right now I get to work with pastors all over the country, pastors and donors and amazing partners. And I have a little bit of that. Like, even though I'm in a significant ministry role where I get to lead significantly, but there is at this moment in my life, I can't do what you do, but I believe so much in what you're doing that I'm lucky that I get to be a friend cheering you on and being from my vantage point, help you keep going. Yeah. And that's just, I feel like, a grace of the Lord. It's like it is. When we say yes to him, even when it hurts, when there's so much loss, he gives us little gifts like that where we just get to keep. It's like, okay, I lost this thing, but now I get to cheer for other people doing it, which is, for me, kind of better.
This summer, Vineyard USA is hosting our national conference, Seed and Soil, in 2 locations, Denver, Colorado on June 17th through 20th, and Cincinnati, Ohio on July 15th through 18th. We hope that by offering 2 locations and dates, everyone, pastors, leaders, volunteers, even those just curious about the Vineyard, everyone will be able to find a time to join us. The conference will have specific programming for adults, youth, and kids, while we focus on cultivating healthy soil in our hearts and planting seeds for the future for all that God wants to do in us and in the Vineyard. Registration is now open with early bird pricing, so make sure to check out vineyardusa.org to learn more and register today.
So with that in mind, tell us kind of what you're excited about of what you get to do. Tell us what you're seeing Alpha do that is inspiring to you, encouraging to you, that ways that, a lot of the folks listening would be in Vineyard churches or Vineyard pastors or folks that at least are interested in what we're up to in the Vineyard. So give us a sense of just what's motivating you at this point and exciting that we could celebrate with you.
I think that there's two things. There's the mission, which I'll get to in a second. The first part is just my own personal leadership, which I feel like I've never been the best player on the team. That's never been like the thing that I am. But what I do is make sure that the best players have the ball at the right time and, a true point guard. And that's just what I get to do. I lead an amazing team that they're just better than me in so many ways. But I get to make space for them to do the thing that they're gifted and called to do, which is always the kind of leader I wanted to be. And really my own skills. That's like not like I wasn't hitting home runs every time, but I'm really pulling out the sports analogies. But I have people on my team that are called to this work, are called to the moment in the country where evangelism, sharing your faith, having tools to look and be more like Jesus in the world are limited. Yeah. And I have this team that I get to pour into and develop and lead that really do an amazing job at making that known to churches and organizations. So that on a personal level just feels really fulfilling and really right. But then in terms of the mission, I feel like God's asking us to do something massive. And the dream is that 100 million people over the next 10 years would encounter the love of Jesus on Alpha all around the world. And each person that works for Alpha, each church running Alpha gets to be a little part of that dream. And it's happening. People are running courses. And if you're listening and you don't know what Alpha is, it's a tool that you have dinner, watch a video about who Jesus is, and then have an open conversation where we don't land the plane. We let people openly process over the course of 11 weeks and then expect the Holy Spirit to meet them.
Yep.
And God just comes in new ways every time in every context. I was just on a call this week with people who are running Alpha in the prison system. Yeah, there's just all these people who are meeting Jesus in like these hidden spaces of the world through this tool. We want to see more of that. And so kind of that first line that I felt like God gave me when I was on the, processing saying yes, is I want you to scale Alpha for growth. It's like I'm really in this position where I get to do that for the US and then see what's happening globally. I mean, just all over the world. I was just hanging out with our team in Latin America, and they are seeing tons of people encounter Jesus, especially students, through the course. And so I always believe in the power of a group. So I was a small groups pastor and like what happens in community. But I think in my heart of hearts, I always just wanted people to know that they're loved and experience it all the way down. And then they can have capacity to love because they are loved themselves. And if I look at what we're trying to do, that's really all we're trying to do is create spaces where people get that experience and hopefully can carry it with them through their lives. And I get to hear those stories all the time.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Well, even just if you were saying like, prisons and college campuses and different parts of the world, and and obviously anybody's listening that's not looked at what Alpha does, it's so worth your time to just take a minute and check out, is there an Alpha course near you? Or if you're a pastor or a leader, I can't think of a single reason why you wouldn't try Alpha.
Totally.
Why not? Yeah, for our national conference, I don't know if you got to see the video that we did with Nikki, this last one. Yeah, and that was so fun. And
so fun.
Hearing him share his heart for, of course, the work with Alpha, but also just his heart for the Vineyard, how much the Vineyard is close to the heart of, a whole strain of the Anglican Church, of course.
Right.
But the specific part of the Anglican Church that Alpha has kind of been birthed out of has such a close relationship with the Vineyard in the U.S. and in the U.K. We just had a little crew of folks over in London.
I heard about that
Vineyard
trip.
Yeah, and they came back
fun.
Buzzing, of seeing
So
an
fun.
Alpha launch, and our guy who does Alpha here, Jerry, came back just beyond excited about, trying some different things, doing it a little differently, being a little more intentional about this, getting to watch folks that have been doing this over and over again.
Yeah.
And so if you were talking to someone who's thinking about so should we try Alpha? How would we do that? What's a good step? Because sometimes we just get stuck at the first speed bump, right? Like, yeah, I should probably I don't know, I'm supposed to do something, but I'm not really sure. Do you just do it? Do you have to tell somebody? Like, how do I get
all those things
onboarded a little bit here? What would you think are good first steps?
Yeah, I think that I always tell people that the first step is to pick a date.
Yep.
So pick a date, look at your calendar and pick a date that you would want or be able to start. Be realistic about that and commit to that date. That's the personal work, is really just choosing to do it. And before I get to the next practical step, I would say why I like to sit on Alpha and be in an Alpha group is because I get 2 hours to practice hospitality, listening, and dependence on the Holy Spirit every week.
Yeah, you do. That's right.
And that makes me look and act more like Jesus in my everyday life than almost any other discipline I've done.
That's great.
And so if you pick a date, you're like, okay, me and my friends or my people in my church are going to intentionally do the things that Jesus did in a circle so that we can grow in our ability to love like he did. And so I think that pick a date, and then we have something on our website, alphausa.org. It's called My Alpha, and you would just register a course. And so what that means is you get a login, and then you get all the materials at no cost to you. Then it kind of shows you what you need to do from there. We've got trainings and all that kind of stuff online, but those are the two things.
Yep.
If you pick a date and then register a course, we'll really be able to walk you through everything. As soon as you interact with Alpha USA through that, create an account, we call. So that's all people need to do is pick a date and then jump in.
It's good. Well, and if you're a Vineyard pastor or leader, we've made a really strong partnership with Alpha. So we have different things all over our website and coaching networks that are connecting people in Vineyard as well.
Yep.
So if you're like, I'm a Vineyard in wherever, is anybody doing this? And anybody could help me in the Vineyard. We have all kinds of folks equipped and ready and excited to coach people and get them into it.
Yeah, in the Vineyard, it's so easy. It's culturally, there's so much alignment around the material that, and then there's Vineyard churches of every size using Alpha. So it doesn't, it's not like, oh, that's just for big churches, or, oh, that's just for small churches. Oh, that's just for whatever. We have examples of every kind of church.
Exactly. No, that's
every size.
That's my experience. And yeah, I mean, we've run Alphas in restaurants and church lobbies and coffee shops and bars and basements and everything in between. And it's hard to describe that there's just a certain kind of favor in the way it works. It's I mean, anytime I've ever kind of gotten pastors into this, when they watch the material, they're always a little thrown off, like, this is pretty straightforward. It's not, it's not like, it's not like tricky or smooth or
totally
careful.
Yep.
It's pretty just straight up.
Yeah.
And there's warmth in it. There's a way it works that feels caring. And then I'm going to just kind of host a nice meal and a nice discussion. And the amount of pastors I know that process this and go home after the first week kind of going, I mean, that was great, but I don't know. Is that actually going to do what we think it's going to do? Like, that's not going to.
Totally.
Nobody's coming back next week. And then sure enough, there they are next week, ready to go. Same kind of deal. It's a strange thing as I've watched pastors do it, or even our own church. I mean, frankly, almost every time we do it and I'm in the room, I have this little like fear grab me. Like,
totally. Me too.
And I'm like, I don't know. What are we doing right now? and then I'm like, Jay, this is like I don't even know how many we've done. This is like your 30th one. Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, that's right.
Yes. It's like when you bring your friend to church for the first time, and you're
always.
Like, man, we're talking about tithing.
Yes, exactly. Anything but this. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and
exactly.
in the context of hospitality, it's just so easy. I mean, and then the Holy Spirit, the weekend away, that whole thing, for those who are in the Vineyard, it's literally like you're just in a Vineyard Holy Spirit training class, effectively. It's like it's like one-to-one. And at least in our experience, that's where the penny drops. That's where most people are like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This is real. It's
totally.
Like, yep, this is real. This isn't just a philosophy. These aren't nice thoughts. This is real. So,
and I think that the course, like when people are watching the videos, I always have the same feeling as you. But the space that happens after the the conversation that happens after you watch, hosts are trained to listen and ask curious questions. And we're asking people to try not to get offended with what people say.
Yep.
So the amount of stories I've heard of people who get viscerally angry when they watch the content, but then they can say that
Yeah.
And people don't freak out.
Yep.
They're like, oh, I'm safe to be a human here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm safe to feel things and have opinions that probably will change because everybody's opinions about everything are constantly changing.
Yep.
But I could say it, and they didn't hold me to this one ideal.
Yeah.
I got to be a whole human. And then the safety that's built inside of that kind of space makes people ready to receive God's love. It's amazing.
Yeah. It is. Yeah. I don't know why you wouldn't do it. If you're doing it now and you're like, I don't know, we're in our first one and this has been tough. It's my experience. It's 2 or 3 times around for it to sort of land, maybe 4 or 5, truth be told. But in that 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, your church is learning not just how are we thinking about sharing our life with Jesus, but hospitality, ministry in the Spirit. So many things are being trained into the culture of a church, the ability to ask and listen well, ask good questions, listen well. So all those materials, if you didn't catch the little things she said there, are free. They're all there, which is mind-blowing.
It is. It's so fun. It's like Oprah.
You get one and you get one. That is
growing all the things of the way of Jesus for free.
That is so great. Good. So let's do one last thing, and then I'll cut you loose. You've been here a long time. If you were going to say something to a pastor or leader, they've heard what we're saying. They're trying to less practical, more like heartfelt. Like, what would you want to say, having been a pastor in the Vineyard, doing Alpha? Like, just prophesy, woman of God. What do you want to? How would you want to bless them? Because I know you love the Vineyard and you love us, and you love what you're doing in Alpha. So it might not even have to do with any of those things. It could just be from your heart. How would you want to?
I think the thing that the gift of Alpha for me as a Vineyard person was exposure to the whole church. And I think my hope and prayer for the Vineyard, and it has been since I switched, was that the Vineyard would experience how much of the church is so good. And the ecumenical nature of Alpha, like the Catholics are using this course and different, mainline churches, and there's just opportunity for you in your locations and your cities to be connected meaningfully to people who are outside of us, and it will make us better. I've just been praying about that a lot. I feel like it's changed me to be in spaces where I get to bring the best of the Vineyard to the room, but then other denominations or affiliations are bringing the best of them to the room. And there's something so amazing about that, that I think self-preservation keeps you connected to yourself, which is appropriate for seasons. Yeah. But if you're running Alpha, or if you're wanting to connect to other churches around you to learn from each other, it will greatly benefit your church. And probably what I know about pastors is they need friends. And I needed, friends that sometimes they're not in your pod of people. And so we got to look outside of ourselves to find it. And then the second thing would just be, I guess, listening to people talk about my dad today, was that everyone talked about how much he loves people. And I was thinking, like, man, nobody talked about his leadership, which a great leader multiplied himself multiple times then. But everybody talked about how much he loved them and they loved him. And if love is the target, you really can't go wrong. That's just the way that Jesus paved for us. And there's so much to be proud of if we do the work to love really well in ministry. And if love stops being the bomb, like the thing, then we get off course. Yeah. So those would be my couple things.
That's good. Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing your heart. And I know you didn't say it, but I know you love the Vineyard best. I know that no matter how much you love the whole church, we're actually the very best. Yeah. So
it's I'm a Vineyard girl. They say, like, when people are from New Jersey, which I'm not, but my family is, they say, like, you can take the girl out of Jersey, but you can't take Jersey out of the girl. That's how I feel. That's how I feel about the Vineyard.
Yeah. Well, and It's amazing to see, I've been getting to travel over the country, in different Vineyard churches, and to see whole, we're now generations in to this thing called the Vineyard. And it's really inspiring to see all the different ways Vineyard people are serving in all kinds of ministries and seminaries. And it's pretty cool. And I'm just super grateful for your work. So I really appreciate you continuing to say yes and serving us. I'm really grateful.
Grateful for you. Very grateful for you.
All right. Well, we'll talk again sometime. We'll talk more about Alpha. I'd love that.
Good.
All right.
Yeah.
Peace.
As we celebrate our 50-year anniversary in the Vineyard, if you're interested in learning more about Vineyard history, there are plenty of resources for you. Check out our show notes for links to books, YouTube videos, and more to learn about Vineyard history and identity. And make sure to keep listening to the podcast this year for stories of Vineyard churches throughout the year.